This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Ice Planet 2002 is one of the most iconic LEGO themes from the 90s. But this isn't a LEGO channel, so today we're going to remake LEGO set 6814 Ice Tunnelator using scale modeling supplies and hobby miniatures instead of LEGO bricks. For this build, I knew we would need some wheels as well as other vehicle-looking parts, and this is the one thing I don't have a lot of in my existing collection of bits and pieces. So I decided to purchase a model tank kit in 1/48th scale, which is roughly the scale of the Ice Planet crew that we built and painted in our previous video. I've never built a model tank before, but I've heard they are great sources of pieces for kit bashing. So I bought this kit that had twice as many wheels and way more parts than I would ever need for this specific build, so that we would have lots of extra parts for use in the future if we want to build even more LEGO space vehicles. To begin, I examined the parts and instructions and realized that if I just built the basic wheel chassis assembly as per the instructions, it would give me 2 little wheel assemblies with 4 wheels each, which is exactly what we're going to need to build this tunnelator. I wasn't sure which assembly would work better as the base for our little tunnelator, so I just built both, and then we'll have an extra wheel assembly for a future build. The parts were extremely easy to assemble, highly detailed, and had surprisingly few mold lines compared to the miniatures that I'm used to building. Overall, I was extremely impressed with this kit and would recommend it as a base for kit bashing your own vehicles. I was just a little bit disappointed that the wheels needed to be glued on and it didn't actually spin, but I guess that just shows my inexperience with military model kits. At this point, I decided to go with the slightly larger subassembly for our tunnelator, and I set the other one aside for use in the future. I then took a quick photo of the wheel assembly with my iPad and did a quick draw over to imagine what the final piece might look like. After this, it was just a matter of building up the basic structure on top of the wheel assembly to match my concept art. I could have built up the entire structure from scratch using styrene sheets, but I also wanted to try to use some of the panels and parts from the model kit wherever possible to take advantage of the built-in texturing and details. So after going through several parts, I decided to trim down these 2 panels to form the sides of the car, as they were roughly the right size and shape and had that sort of triangle piece on the back that evoked the original LEGO set. I cut these down to size using my hobby knife, glued them onto the sides using plastic cement, and while those were drying, I started thinking about how I was going to achieve one of the most iconic pieces in this set, the front-mounted, neon orange transparent chainsaw. This kit came with a tiny friction-based assembly for moving the tank turret that was the perfect size and shape for mounting the chainsaw. So I quickly put that together as per the instructions, test fit its position on the model, and then set it aside while I tried to find the perfect piece to form the bumper of the car. And I ended up going with this piece, as I felt it retained some of that essential spirit of the original front LEGO stud piece, and after this was done, I cut out a piece of sheet styrene to form the front of the car, glued that down, and then glued the chainsaw assembly on top of it. I glued yet another sheet of styrene onto the floor of the car so that the driver would have something to sit or stand on, and then I started thinking about the back of the car. I found 2 pieces that I thought would work well, cut them down to size, and glued them on in a sort of wedge shape. And with the basic structure of the car complete, it was once again time to start thinking about the neon orange transparent chainsaw. But before we do that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my own personal neon orange transparent chainsaw, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website and hosting platform that I've been using for over a decade now for all of my website needs. You just pick a template that looks good to you, drag and drop in any pages or elements you might like using their incredibly modular and intuitive new grid system, and your website is good to go. I've been using my current Squarespace website for just a little bit over a year now to house all of my hobby progress, reference materials, as well as my merch store. So if you need a website for virtually any reason at all, why not check out squarespace.com today for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/DanaHowell for 10% off your very first purchase of a website or domain. And now back to our chainsaw. I thought about this part of the build probably more than any other part, as it's one of the most iconic parts of this set and Ice Planet in general. And my biggest disappointment from my previous build of the Ice Planet crew was that the neon parts weren't actually transparent. So this time around, I wanted to try kit bashing at least the chainsaw out of transparent plastic, and I had a few ideas of what to use for this, but ended up going with this plastic container from an old drawer I had from, I think it's called a stack-on tool organizer, which coincidentally I had originally bought to organize some LEGO parts. I cut 2 pieces of this plastic to roughly the size and shape that I needed using my hobby knife, and my idea here was to make at least the 2 outside parts of the chainsaw out of transparent plastic, while building all of the interior bits out of neon orange plastic greebles. So using my airbrush, I primed a bunch of potential greebles from the tank kit in white, and then gave them a spray of what is now maybe my new favorite neon orange color, Citadel Contrast Magmadroth Flame. I also did the same thing to a few strips of this evergreen tile styrene that I've used for miniature bases in the past, and I then cut these little squares down into 1/8 to form the blades of the chainsaw. After this, I spent quite a while arranging all of these parts onto one of the sides of the transparent chainsaw, creating a border of orange saw blades. I glued all of this on with tacky glue. In retrospect, I probably should have used super glue. And I then filled in the interior with various little detailed greebly bits that I imagine might be what's inside a high-tech neon orange transparent chainsaw. Once this was dry, I went in and used my hobby knife to carve down the chainsaw blades just a little bit, making them look a little bit more rounded and a little bit more uniform in size. I then gave all the pieces yet another thin down coat of Magmadroth Flame before gluing both sides of the chainsaw together. And with our neon orange chainsaw mostly complete, I started thinking about how I was going to build the pilot for this vehicle. I started off by putting together a little soldier using the same Stargrave sprues that I used for the rest of the Ice Planet crew, but for this one, I cut off his legs and used green stuff to try to sculpt him back together into a sitting pose. This sort of worked. And while that was drying, I used some of the excess green stuff to fill in some gaps on the vehicle. Once the green stuff had hardened, I used my hobby knife to carve away any excess green stuff from the driver's butt so that he would fit into the driver's seat. I then set the driver aside and returned to the car, adding extra layers of detail from various parts of the tank kit to just flesh the build out a little bit more, and here is a montage of me doing that. As the car detailing was nearing completion, I did some more cutting and gluing to pose the driver's arm like he was holding 2 levers, perhaps one to steer the vehicle and one to operate the chainsaw. And I did a little bit more green stuff sculpting on him at this point as well, adding some fur trim, texture, and extra bits like I did with the rest of the Ice Planet crew. Now with our chainsaw, pilot, and main car build complete, it was time to figure out how to attach everything together. For the driver, I decided I would just let him sit in there and have him be removable, but for the chainsaw, I wanted to go for something a little bit special: magnets. And this was pretty easy to do. Honestly, I just glued a magnet to each side of the chainsaw's join, and once it's glued on, you can see it allows us a lot more freedom when posing the saw, and it also allows me to remove the saw and the driver completely if I want to use this as just a background piece of terrain in another sci-fi game or something. For the painting, I kept things pretty simple, and I more or less just followed the methods that I laid out in my original Ice Planet crew video. I started with a zenithal through my airbrush, gave everything a white dry brush, and then applied a single thick coat of Citadel Contrast Pilar Glacier to the whole model to give it some basic cool white type shading. I followed this up by base coating any orange parts with Magmadroth Flame, and then painted the blue and black parts using Frostheart for any light blue cloth parts, Talisar Blue for any of the traditional Ice Planet blue parts, and a 50-50 mix of Talisar Blue and Black Legion for any parts I wanted to look black. After this, I spent a little bit of time re-highlighting some of the white areas on the model before realizing the model felt severely lacking in the neon orange department. So rather than paint some random areas in neon orange, I broke out some of the remaining bits that I had previously sprayed in neon orange and glued them onto the model in areas that I thought either needed a little bit of extra texture or a little bit of neon orange. I was particularly happy to add a few more bits to the pilot's head to really give him some more character and to make him look a little bit more Ice Planet. I also realized at this point that I had neglected to make the set of neon orange skis that attached to the back of the Tunnelator, so I used the same method as I used for the chainsaw, carved some plastic skis out of transparent plastic, sprayed them in orange, and glued them to the back of the car. I then used this extra little rope piece from the tank kit to look like it's holding the skis on the back. At this point, I was pretty happy with how the paint job was going, but I felt like the all-white wheels, while faithful to the original set, just needed an extra color or something to give them some visual interest, as they were just this big wall of white. So I tried painting the rims in Talisar blue, and then highlighted those in white, and I was a lot happier with that look. Finally, I took some gray paint and added some random dots and lines to the model to look like scratched paint or weathering, and that's pretty much it. That is my remake of LEGO set 6814 Ice Tunnelator. Before we go, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to all of our lovely patrons who support this channel month after month, and this week I'd like to extend a special thank you to Sharon Starnes, ECB22, Sour Wormple, as well as Nick on Planet Ripple, whose YouTube series LEGO Rewind was a huge inspiration for these builds and my interest in retro LEGO in the first place. I've left a link down in the description if you want to check out his channel for yourself. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of this build and what LEGO sets you'd like to see me do remakes of in the future, and I will see you in the next video.